Hello and welcome to the Film Ireland podcast. Today we are delighted to present a very special live event supported by Screen Ireland and in partnership with Griffith College. In this panel we hear from Maureen Hughes, an accomplished and skilled casting agent whose career spans 4 decades across film, television and theatre. She has worked with acclaimed directors including Martin McDonagh, Jim Sheridan, Paolo Sorrentino and Pat Collins, and her credits range from The Apprentice, directed by Ali Abbasi, to Dawn for Hulu and Night Flyers for NBC Universal. Maureen is joined by Mo O'Connell, and not only is Mo an award-winning filmmaker and producer, she's a RADA graduate who has acted for stage and screen across Ireland and the UK. Screen Sessions was recorded live at Griffith College last December.
Okay, it's amazing to have you here. So just a very, very quick intro. I know you all know who Maureen is, and if I sat here reading out all her amazing achievements, we'd be here all day. So just to say quickly, in 1984, Maureen joined the Druid Theatre Company, working with the incredible Gary Hines, which led to working at the Abbey. And then we'll talk with the Saw Doctors in a bit, where she went off with the Saw Doctors. And then she worked with Susie Figgis to cast the Butcher Boy and the phenomenal Eamon Owens. And then she went on to work with Sam Shepard, Martin McDonagh, Paolo Sorrentino, Jim Sheridan, John Carney on Once, which was incredible. And I suppose, just to skip ahead, because I'll be here all day, That They May Face the Rising Sun recently, which again was just such a stunning, stunning film and amazing casting, you know. So yeah, so I'll just jump in and get started. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, so I was just curious because I didn't really know much about Maureen Hughes, about her background or anything. So where are you from?
I'm from a small village in northeast Galway. I went to school in a boarding school in Tuam, where I was raised and educated by the Presentation Convent nuns. I was an avid folk musician. I loved folk music, and it was, of course, around the time of all the great folk bands like Dodonnan, Blankstead, the Bothy Band. So I kind of went to Galway because it seemed to be, after the Leaving Cert, I went to Galway because I wanted to hang out there. It's where all the bands were. And I got a job in the Atlanta Hotel as a bar girl, which is where I didn't really have any ambition to be anything. I think I'd gotten out of boarding school after being locked up there for 6 years, and I just wanted to kind of find the world. Everyone wanted me to go to college. I had no interest in college. My mother wanted me to get a job in the bank. I had no interest in that. I didn't want to be a nurse, and I knew I didn't want to be a civil servant. I really wanted to be a hippie. And a hippie I became. And I went to Galway to be a hippie. And Galway was full of hippies, and I was very happy. But I got a job in the Atlanta Hotel, and I was playing in a band, a really bad pub band, because I wasn't really a good musician. I had notions about myself that I was a great whistle player, but I wasn't Mary Bergen. But I played in a band in the King's Head, and I worked on a pirate radio station, and I worked as a bar girl in the Atlanta, which is where the Druids were drinking. And when I went to leave I was very good to them. I did a lot of after hours. I used to run the bar till like 4 o'clock in the morning just to feed them drink after shows. And so when I went to leave the Atlanta, I got a letter from Jerome Hines saying, I can't believe you're leaving the Atlanta. You can't. You know everything about us. We need you in here where we can protect our secrets. So he offered me a job in Druid as a kind of a gopher, really. I was like, go for this, go for that. I didn't have any function. But I very quickly, probably within a year, Gary had spotted something in me. I was really interested in performance. Maybe because I loved music as well, and I attended a lot of gigs, but I really kind of engaged with the active performance. So I started to get really interested in actors and whom I thought was good or whom I thought was interesting. And suddenly I kind of segued into casting under the very keen eye of Gary Hines, who taught me so much. Really, she was my first mentor, and I learned a huge amount from her. So I spent 3 years working in Druid, and then I ran away. I just thought, I can't do this. It's not who I am. I just wanted back out in the world. I wanted my hippie life back, and I left Druid of a Tuesday, and I was out of work for 4 months when I got a call from her to say she was going into the Abbey, and would I come in as casting director into the Abbey? And I thought, well, I'm doing nothing else, and it sounded like a really good job. And so I went into the Abbey for 3 years. But I left there as well after 2.5 years. I had really itchy feet. Again, the music world was calling me, and I went back on the road with the Saw Doctors For wise as you, I don't know, says I. But I got on a bus with Soul Doctors for 2 years, touring up and down the motorways of the UK, basically. We were doing gigs in Glasgow, Manchester, Liverpool. We were on the road for about 2 years. And then I read The Butcher Boy, as you do. It was the novel of the time, 1995-96. I read it on the bus. I remember finishing the book and saying, I don't know why I'm saying this, but I think this book's going to change my life. And about a week later, I read an article that Neil Jordan is making the movie. And his casting director is Susie Figgis. And so I write to her and say, you have to give me a job. And I think I was saying to you earlier, I think she was more interested in the fact that I was on a bus with 22 men, on a Saw Doctors tour than she was in the fact that I was an actual casting director from the Abbey Theatre. But anyway, I went down to meet her and she asked me to go to Ireland to find the Butcher Boy. And so I got into a car in Ireland and I toured. It was a really interesting time actually for casting children because there were no huge regulations in the country at the time. I could literally walk in and out of about 5 national schools a day without any prior notice and say, can I have a look at the lads in 6th class? And the headmaster would go, absolutely, and get a room for Miss Hughes here, please, and show her the lads. Like, you couldn't do it today. And it was on one of those days that I walked into a school in Killashandra, and the headmaster looked at me and he said, there's a fella in there, I'm telling you now, if that's what you're looking for, this fella has it all. And I thought, yeah, everybody says that. And I walk in and I see at the back of the room this mad red-haired young fella, and I remember thinking, oh my God, is it this easy? Is this him? And it was Eamon Owens with the big freckles and the red hair. And it was interesting because Neil Jordan had met me before I started out on the journey to say, where do you think you're going to find this boy? And Neil himself was convinced that we would find the boy in the travelling community. Neil is very visual in the way that he thinks of in film. He plays to the visual. And so he had seen a series of portraits of young traveller boys that Perry Ogden had taken, and they were exquisite, one more exquisite looking than the next. You know, that beautiful kind of flat cheek paint, but also flattened cheekbones, almost Slavic. He loved the look of a traveller boy. And so I had spent a lot of time in halting sites, auditioning traveller children as well. But nobody had the fire water in their veins that Eamon Owens had. It was kind of extraordinary. And there's a great story, and I'm sure there's probably loads of people who've heard it here, because he came in for his audition and Neil Jordan said, so how are you? And Eamon had the hands on the pockets, and Eamon, he was 12. He said, did the fella before me get the job? This is an unbelievable story. And Neil Jordan, of course, just got very kind of tongue-tied and said, sorry, excuse me? And he says, did the fella before me get the job? And Neil Jordan looked around at me as if to say, what the fuck is this? And he said, we're seeing a lot of young boys here today. Have you a problem with that? And Eamon said, yeah, I have, because if he did get the job, I'm not making a fucking bollocks of myself for you. And Neil Jordan looked around at me and went, oh my God, this is him. And said, get Pat McCabe up here immediately. Pat McCabe at the time lived on Tritonville Road, in Sandymount, and we were auditioning, John, you would know the place, we were auditioning in the Courtyard Studios, so Pat was brought up to meet this mad red-haired kid with the foul tongue. And but what was interesting about Eamon was that Eamon was the son of the local VG store in Killashandra. And every weekend, Eamon worked in the shop, and he mimicked all the customers who came in. He could tell you about old Johnny Lamb who came down with the one leg, or Mrs. Price who came in and she had one blind eye, and he had a whole catalogue of characters that he had construed from his own locality. And so very quickly, I think Neil saw in him someone who could play a village. And that's what got him the Butcher Boy. That was my first film.
Wow, what a first film. Yeah. It's incredible. Actually, Eamon Owens told me about that. He was afraid that the kid who played his friend in it was the one who had auditioned before him. Yeah. And he knew he'd had a good audition. Yeah. And he was raging when he went in. Yeah, it's a brilliant story. Well, you've answered a lot of my first questions, which is brilliant. But I suppose because you kind of went from theatre to The Butcher Boy, which was your first film, just talking about the differences there with regards to casting, and then also kind of moving into self-tapes versus being in the room. So.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, the first film, in a way, educated me a lot about what kind of casting director I was going to be. And it is something I suppose I've become known for. I do look at people who walk into a room, and my first instinct when an actor walks into a room is, what comes for free here? With Eamon Owens, the amount that came for free was unbelievable. Eamon was an untrained 12-year-old boy who had never acted in his whole life. And yet so much of who he was and what he knew and how he observed the world, all of that came for free. None of that was acted. There was an instinct to the way he walked down the road, the way he goes, how you ladies. You could see him saying that to the women who came in after Mass in Killashandra into the shop for the Sunday newspapers. Do you know what I mean? That, again, it was what came for free with Eamon that made him so distinctive and so right for us. So I think that has been a mark of the way I've cast, in a way. I do look at actors, and I think in first instance, actors often worry, what's she looking for, or what's she looking for on behalf of the person she's working for. But if I've called you into the room, it's because I think there's something distinctive about you. And if you come in second guessing what you think I'm looking for, and you play outside of yourself, or you don't bring your authentic self into the room, then it's over. I'm not interested anymore. And you think, I did a good audition there. I wonder why she didn't call me back. And it's because I didn't believe you. I love authenticity. When we were casting That They May Face the Rising Sun, I knew that I was going to go back to theatre actors. There's something about actors who've worked in the theatre on plays by Tom Murphy and Brian Friel, in particular those two, I guess, because they're the two big playwrights that have featured in my life as a casting director. But there's a knowledge of rural life as a result, and there's a shared experience. So actors like Sean McGinley and Brendan Conroy and John Olin instinctively walked onto that script by John McGahern for Pat and were able to absolutely land beautiful moments because they've already done that work and they've already been in that work and they know instinctively the mood of the piece. Because there's never time to rehearse on a film shoot. It's like you cast the people you know can walk on set tomorrow morning and deliver those kind of performances. So as a casting director, I'm very reliant on what comes for free with an actor. I'm really reliant on actors being very much their authentic selves when they come into a room. I also like the idea of the audition not being a test. I always find it strange when people feel they're being tested in an audition. I think it's such a wrong way for an actor to look at it. I see it very much as a collaboration. I think an actor takes the script I've sent them, they rehearse it for no money, they spend time with it, they prepare their version of it, and they come to a table with me and a director on a day and say, look, this is what I would do with it if I was right for it. This is the way I interpret this scene. And that to me is the collaboration. So sometimes the collaboration isn't what you're looking for, but I really feel uncomfortable with the idea that the audition is a test of someone. If that's the case, and people like Sean McGinley are still testing after 40 years for work, makes me feel deeply uncomfortable. I do like the idea of collaboration. And I think maybe because it was also because I worked with Pat Collins on this film, and Pat had never directed actors before and was very conscious that he didn't want to audition actors because he felt it would be so unnatural for him to audition. Why would I audition an actor when you're telling me they're this good? So I thought, how am I going to get actors in front of him so that we can actually cast this picture? So I kind of came up with the idea of doing readings, which I paid the actors to do, to come in, take 15 actors in around a table like this and put Pat somewhere in the room and just say to the actors, can you take the script and just read it, as you would if you were in character. And that's how Pat was allowed to fall in love with people. He then picked his people from that. So it wasn't an audition, and yet it was in some kind of strange way. But the actors got paid for the reading, and Pat was allowed to fall in love with who he wanted to fall in love with. So again, I felt it kind of extended the collaborative nature of what I wanted to do. So yeah, what comes for free? I hate self-tapes. I think everybody knows this at this stage. I'm so boring about self-tapes. I hate them. I hate them because they're so one-dimensional, and they're just, this. And And I miss all that magic stuff of the actor walking into the room, and that magic that sometimes happen when you see a director sit up because someone's walked into a room, and however they sat into the chair, they've just done something that the director goes, oh my God, I think I'm going to like this person. You never get that in a self-tape. And I understand that self-tapes are the new norm and that we all have to do them. But in as far as I can, and I've spent the week in a room with actors for the Walsh Sisters, I will fight for the room because that's where I'm happiest as a casting director. I mean, I don't know how actors feel about it. I do know people like me get to see more people if I do self-tapes, but I often wonder if it's, quantity over quality. Anyway, that's me.
That's great. Well, I was just thinking about the factory that you helped set up in 2014, and what you did there was really unusual and special as well. I mean, it was kind of it reminded me of the audition for That They May Face the Rising Sun, where you kind of almost did a workshop reading. So you were kind of creating these workshops all the time with these directors and actors on like a weekly basis, or? Yeah.
The factory was set up really out of, Kirsten, John and Lance had decided to set up, and they approached me. I was casting Love Hate at the time, and Love Hate was kind of the talk of the town because it was very popular. We were probably in our second season or maybe even third, but it was very popular. Everybody was talking about it. Everyone wanted to be in it. It was hugely successful. But for me, the reason to join the factory came out of the fact that when I moved into Dublin first, there was an actors' centre. It may not have been completely active, but there was a place where actors could go. We had the City Arts Centre down in, I can't remember the name of the quay. Maybe some of the people here might know. City Arts Centre, do you remember it? Yeah, it was not Usher's Quay, it was further down. Anyway, there was that. There was a couple of places that actors could meet in or go and get the word, and Diggs Lane was really good as well because a lot of auditions were held in Diggs Lane. And suddenly there was nothing. They were all closed down. There was kind of nowhere for actors to go. And I remember thinking, the factory might become that place, kind of a drop-in centre. But what was exciting about it was I was casting Love Hate. We had this big building, we had loads of rooms, and then we had the benefit of three rising directors. John Carney was about to kind of go nuclear. He had just done Once. We didn't know what was ahead, but we knew there was going to be a lot more films. Kirsten Sheridan had also directed August Rush and Disco Pigs with Killian and Elaine, so we knew she was going somewhere. And Lance Daly had just directed what I still regard as one of the most beautiful pictures about Dublin, called Kisses. Has anyone seen it? I absolutely love that film. There's such a beauty. And the performances he gets out of those two kids is just kind of magical. So they were all going to be part of it. And I thought, oh my God, this is such an amazing idea. And of course, you open the doors to this mad building where there's no heat and no money, and they pour in the doors. Like, people were sleeping there. It was mad. It was a mad experiment. Johnny Ronan had given us the building because he, at the time, owned it, we think. Eventually, we got thrown out because Google bought it from somebody that wasn't Johnny Ronan. I think it might have been a bank somewhere. But we got to spend 2 to 3 years there, and it was probably, and I will look back on it, as the most magical of times. I remember casting for Paolo Sorrentino in there. Paolo Sorrentino was making a film called This Must Be the Place, and he'd asked me to do some of the Irish casting on it because they were spending 3 weeks casting, or a 3-week shoot in Dublin with Frances McDormand and Sean Penn, and I had to find the young girl to play the goth, and so we had loads of auditions, and so he came in, and we ended up casting Sam Keeley on that picture as well. He fell in love with Sam Keeley. And he walked into the building and went, oh my God, what is this? And I said, this is the factory. And he said, he just thought it was the most extraordinary place he'd ever been in. But it was cold. And we all lived on toasted ham sandwiches.
Nice one. And it's become Bow Street Academy now, which kind of specialises, ironically now, in self-tapes, which is kind of a bit of a... Sorry.
It does, yeah. It did become Bow Street, and Bow Street became something slightly different to the factory. It became more organised. Jerry Grinnell joined the team. He wanted a much more streamlined, less chaotic kind of version of the factory, which has its own benefits, and actors are trained properly as opposed to loosely. because loose is really the only word I could describe what we were doing in the factory, and yet a lot of magic came out of it. But yes, we do need to talk about self-tapes, because I am one of the very few who favour the room. Most other casting directors cast by self-tape. So it is the future. It is the now and it is the future. I might fight against it, but you know, I'm 63 now. What have I left in the business? Another couple of years. Who's going to give a shit about what I think in about 4 years' time? Self-taping will be the norm. There will be people like me who'll fight for the room, but we'll be in the minority. So Bow Street doing self-tape courses is important in a way. I don't deny that. And casting directors using it to cast pictures, I don't love it, but there are other people who swear by it. So I do think it's down to personal choice. I do know that more actors get seen. I think it gives actors greater visibility, and maybe that's one thing I wanted to talk about today, because I suspect most of the audience here is from the acting community. One of the things I did want to talk about is how actors keep their visibility in this industry. You know, how do you stay in front of people like me? There are now four, you know, when I started in the business, there were only 2 casting directors working here. One was Nuala Mazzell, who was working with Jim Sheridan and pretty much doing all Jim's work, like In My Left Foot and Birmingham 6. And then there was the Hubbards, who were dividing their time between Dublin and London, but in around the time I would have started out, they would have been doing Angela's Ashes here, The Commitments, all of those big jobs. And Leo Davis, who had also done some Roddy Doyle work. So 3 casting directors. Now there's about 14 casting directors in Ireland alone, which is quite a lot. How do you stay visible? Short films. People say to me, how do you find your talent now? I used to scour Facebook and Instagram for people's personal lives. I still do that a little bit, don't tell anyone. I am at all your bar mitzvahs, christenings and weddings. But really it's the short film or the independent films, but mostly short films I do follow a lot. I feel if you're an actor trying to get in front of people like me, if I can see you in a short film, that's amazing. That means you're active, you're proactive about your career, and you're working with the rising directors, hopefully. So the short film has always been a huge Bible for me in this country. I work on the Fastnet Film Festival in Skull, which is the big festival for the short film here. I've been very lucky I was invited down there probably about 8 years ago, and I go every year. That to me is just, it's like the most fertile ground for rising talent. So I get to see all the short films that are in competition, so I get access to them, and then I do a workshop when I'm down there. So yeah, working on short films is really important if you can get cast in them. People might say, oh, I'm just working on a short film, and I'm going to, don't call it just a short film. That short film is the very, very one thing that could land you an amazing career.
You cast Six Shooter, yeah, which went on to win the Oscar as well, so yeah. Anything can happen, yeah. I suppose I'll just kind of move on with the questions. Yeah. Have you ever cast something that you felt, I made a mistake there, or did you think the director made a mistake and went against what you had suggested? Has there ever been anything like that? A bit of turbulence, maybe?
No, but I do remember when Paolo Sorrentino came to me with the film This Must Be the Place, and I said, oh my God, who have you cast in the lead? Because it was an extraordinary film about an aging goth rock star. And when I had read it, and what was interesting about Sorrentino's script, I was sent the script before I met him, is he wrote very like Stuart Carlin in Love Hate, which meant that every scene opens with a very particular piece of music. He's already chosen the music. And I was fascinated with his choice of music. There's a lot of talking heads in it, but there's also a lot of really beautiful classical music in it. So what I find myself doing when I'm reading that script is I put together the playlist on Spotify, and then I play it as I'm reading the script. So the music in some way rides alongside the scenes, and so you can feel your way in and out of it. So I was intrigued by it. So I read the script. I don't know who he's cast as the lead. And I had just seen Jerusalem in London with Mark Rylance. And I found it extraordinary. I don't know if anyone else here saw Jerusalem with Mark Rylance in London. Anyone? Anyway, it blew my mind. I remember coming out of it thinking I will never see anything as good again. And I don't know if I'll ever see an actor as good as Mark Rylance on stage. So when I read the script that Sorrentino has sent me, I go, oh my God, Mark Rylance should be playing this lead. And so 2 weeks later, Sorrentino flies in to do the auditions for the young goth that I'm casting. And I say to him, so who's playing the lead? And he goes, amazing. He said, we've just signed on the dotted line. It's Sean Penn. And I went, what? And he went, it's Sean Penn. And I went, he's so wrong. And Sorrentino went, excuse me? I went, but he's terrible. He's like, that is not the right role for him. And Sorrentino was quite taken aback by my frankness and my opinion, which was rather forthright. And he said, well, who do you think should play it? And I said, oh my God, the actor who should be playing it is Mark Rylance. But of course, Mark Rylance hadn't done any of the Spielberg stuff at this stage, so he wasn't really well known internationally. And he said, who is this Mark Rylance? I don't know this Mark Rylance. Anyway, we have Sean Penn, and Sean Penn is going to play it. And I remember thinking, Sean Penn's going to be a disaster. Cut to, and this is a very interesting tale for self-tapers. I had to give up on my Mark Rylance idea. They'd cast Sean Penn anyway. It wasn't my job. I was off casting the smaller roles, and it was none of my business. But I was casting the role of Mary, the young goth, and I'd asked several young actresses in London to tape for me because we couldn't get to London with Sorrentino, so I was dependent on tapes. And 10 tapes arrived in from London, and I opened one of them, and I went, oh no. So a young actress had taped for the role of Mary, and Mark Rylance was her reader. And I knew the minute the tape opened, I knew it was Mark Rylance. I remember thinking, fuck, all you're interested in is his voice. So I don't say anything to Sorrentino. I send the 10 tapes of the 10 Marys from London. And the following morning I get a call from Sorrentino. He goes, yes, Marina, watch the tapes are very good. I like one. One, he says, there's a very good reader, he says, on one of the tapes. And he says, do you know who's reading opposite actress B? And I went, yes, I do. It's, Mark Rylance. And he went, oh my God, he's very good. The girl didn't get the audition. The problem was, actually, if you have a reader who's better than you, it's not a good thing. Didn't help her, what shall we say. So yeah, in that case, and I do look at the film that Sorrentino made with Sean, and I still see why Sean is so wrong on it. It's not the right role for him. Even superstars can be wrong. That's really important to know. I still look at that film, and it didn't really... Like, Sorrentino is an exquisite filmmaker. But I think he was forced into using Penn for that role because Penn brought the green light and the money. But actually, because it was an aging UK goth kind of Adam Ant sort of creature, I did think Mark Rylance would have been a much better piece of casting for it. But he wasn't well known at the time, and he wouldn't have greenlit a picture. He hadn't done any of the Spielberg stuff. I'm not even sure now he would greenlight a picture. There's very few actors at the end of the day that will greenlight a picture. When they say, oh, I've got such and such a body, and there was a time when Tom Cruise would absolutely greenlight a picture. Sean Penn definitely had a time when I don't know if he'd do it now. Cillian Murphy can greenlight a picture at this point, but you kind of look to previous Oscar winners of 5 years, and they can. And then they wear off as well, and there's 5 new guys in town. Anyway, that is my only one story about getting it wrong. I never get it wrong.
Okay, great. That's brilliant. You talked a little bit about your process there. You just said, so you play music along with reading the script. So is that what you do with every script, or?
Yeah, I suspect music is a huge part of my life. I was not a very good musician, but I adore music. And I do think in our world of film and theatre that music, dance, art are all huge food items, maybe, in a way, to kind of nurture our whatever it is we're good at, be it acting or casting or directing, or that one of those food groups we lean into. Sometimes I'll find directors like Neil Jordan will lean into less music but more visual art, and and writing, really good writing, because he himself sees, he's a novelist. Killian, for instance, Murphy always leans into music, and you can see it from what he does himself in his own life. At the time I met Killian, he had just done Disco Pigs in Cork, and he was still in college, and he was also in a band, and they were about to be signed, I think, by Sony Records. When I rang him and said, "Will you come to Druid and do a play reading?" and he nearly went, "Stop, Maureen, jeez, I can't do that. I'm doing the law degree at the moment, and we're about to sign a record deal," and he gave it all up. But I think music has been a big driver in his life as well. He makes his programs for the BBC. You can see he holds on to his, that's his fuel, I think, as well. So for me, yeah, music has always been a driver. I love it. Yeah. I used to play, I haven't played in years, I used to play flute and whistle. Yeah. Diddly eye, yeah. Books of Oran Moore. Saw Doctors were kind of folky, hippy-dippy. They were part of that whole fantastic 10 years that I spent in Galway in the 80s, which was the most magical time. Macnas started, the Galway Arts Festival was in play. We were bringing in these amazing European companies to be in the Galway Arts Festival, like Ilse Comedians, Royal Deluxe. Like, the influences in Galway for people like me in the 80s were spectacular. And it was the home of diddly eye music. It was the decade of the great big supergroups in traditional music, like the Bothy Band, Donnan, Plankstee, Moving Hearts, Arcady. It was a very fertile decade in that community in Galway, and Galway was the place to be. I remember Sinead O'Connor coming down to play a concert in the Thaviark and kind of not wanting to leave, because everywhere you looked there was one more brilliant musician than the next, sitting in a corner somewhere in some pub playing exquisite music. And I remember her looking, going, "Oh my God, this place is magical." It lasted 10 years. These things move, they come, they sit, they move on to another place. But I feel very lucky that for the 10 years I was in Galway, that was my world. And I was very influenced by it.
What really comes across is just how creative you are. I really get this sense that you're so creative, and that you really listen to your own inner voice, I think, is really remarkable about you and about your story. Just what you've been talking.
I think it's important to thine own, like one of the great lines from Shakespeare, "To thine own self be true." I would like to think I live by it myself, and I would like, if actors ever ask me for advice, that would be the line I would ask them to consider in their decision making and in their planning of their careers, that it's really important that you are you, that you own where you're from. I'm always interested in your natural accent. I'm always interested in where you're from. I'm always interested, like I was looking at Black Doves the other night. I don't know if anyone has seen Black Doves yet on Netflix. You have. I am in love with Ella Lily Hyland, the Irish actress with the big accent from Tullamore, and she doesn't change it. And I think there was about 4 times where I thought I could see Ben Whishaw corpsing inside. Every time she spoke, I thought, she's corpsing. She is corpsing Ben Whishaw, because she's extraordinary. She lives entirely onto herself. There's such a huge sense of ownership about who she is and where she's from, without putting on silly accents. She doesn't ask for forgiveness for being from wherever she is, which is South Midlands, I suspect, maybe Offaly, somewhere down there. Kerry Condon, also another actress who has never really kind of lost who she is. Barry Keoghan is still very Dublin in a lot of the work he does. And when he does try to do an accent, I don't believe him. But when he's in his own accent, I'm totally with him. It doesn't matter if it doesn't have a narrative that supports it. I just want to believe him. So yeah, to thine own self be true would be probably my greatest advice at this stage of my life.
Have you ever wanted to direct yourself?
Yeah. If I had chosen any other profession outside of what I do now, I might have turned to directing. Maybe after the factory I considered it. But I also consider how useful perhaps I am staying doing what I'm doing. I've never seen myself as a casting director who discovers people. That kind of title kind of bothers me slightly. I don't discover people. People, really good actors have always been there. I didn't make them or find them. They were always there. But what I do think what I am good at is if I do see them or I meet with them, I know what doors to knock on for them. Like when Barry Keoghan came into the factory, I knew I had to get him on Love Hate. I thought Love Hate would really benefit from having somebody like Barry Keoghan on it, actually, which was my first instinct, because the authenticity of Barry Keoghan was really interesting to me because he was from that world. What I didn't know was how powerful an actor he was. I was only beginning to learn about how powerful a presence he had on camera. But I knew when he came to the factory that I needed to get him on Love Hate. Jack Rayner also came to the factory roughly around the same time. I knew that Love Hate wasn't the door I needed to press for Jack. What I needed to press for Jack was Kirsten Sheridan's first film, which he did, Dollhouse. And so it's about knowing. I see my strength as knowing how to match the right actor with the right project and making it happen. That's how I see myself. And so will I direct now? Probably not, because I think I have helped. I think I have found the right match for a lot of actors. Killian Scott, I found in the middle of Love Hate. He's gone on to do really good work. Art Campion, Charlie Murphy. Love Hate was like a gift in terms of a script for introducing new talent. It isn't often you get that level of script that allows somebody like me to break so much new talent. But there's always something. I'm currently working on a project called The Walsh Sisters, which is based on a set of novels by Marion Keyes, which will be directed by Ian Fitzgibbon, the Irish director who did Moon Boy and Paths to Freedom, I think, with Michael Hatton. He's worked in England for the last 10 years, but he's Irish. Again, it's about trying to find new faces for that and pushing the door open for the actors I think could benefit from having a door pushed open for them. Yeah.
But I mean, that's an incredible thing to do, to release those talents to us that we, enjoy, and are inspired by. So they couldn't do it without you,
Well, they could,
yeah. What you do is great, so, I suppose, when have you not, enjoyed it? Or because you have spoken before a little bit about wanting to run away from the job, and why might that be?
I think weirdly, and I suspect actors feel like this all the time as well. I often thought I wasn't good enough. I used to think, what makes me the kind of, you question yourself and you think, what makes me the one that thinks they're right about this person? And often as well, I would feel I had a kind of a run of it in the Abbey where I brought actors that I thought were really interesting in for audition and they didn't get cast. And so I started to second guess myself and thought, oh, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am. Nobody else sees what I see. And so, yeah, I think it's true of all professions. None of us are ever as sure about it as we think we are. And so if and when I did run away from it, it was always because of a lack of self-belief. I've had less problems with self-belief in the last 10 years. I think it's something to do with getting older, not giving a shit anymore. But certainly up to my early 50s, I would have had periods of time where I thought, am I as good as I think I am? Or am I as good as people think I am? But I think that's the human condition. I think it's not personal to me or to actors in particular, but it does affect us in our profession. It's, I've always had an issue with the fact that we assess actors constantly. I'm not sure there's another profession, or at least I haven't seen one, where you have to kind of prove yourself every couple of weeks to somebody else that you're right for the job. There's kind of a constant ongoing form of assessment that goes on about actors, unless you're a major name like Cillian Murphy, who anyone would be glad to get on their picture, or whoever. But really, in the main, actors are constantly being assessed by people like me and directors and producers. And I experience a level of discomfort with that. And there's nothing I can do about that. Because it is the way it's the way the business is run. Like I found myself yesterday, we're on another project, and an Irish actor's name came up for potential casting, and the director and the producer said to me, would they come in and read? And in the bottom of my stomach, I just went, no. Actually, no, I don't want them to come in and read. Why don't you get off your ass and watch some of their work? Because they've got an amazing amount of work on film and television at the moment. And, you know, if you like it, make them an offer. And then we can set up a meeting. But, you know, you do get to the point where, you know, young directors and young producers go and say, I'd really like such and such one to read for me. And I'm kind of going, no. Because, you know, are they asking you to meet them? Because, you know, there's an inequity in it somewhere, if you know what I mean.
What advice would you give to actors, especially young actors, I suppose, who find auditions and going into the room, because they're so unusual now, I suppose, as well, nerve-wracking? And if they're a good actor, but they give a bad performance, shall we say, or a nervy performance, would you ever stop the audition and kind of tell them to take 10 and come back, or would there be anything like that? Whatever.
No, I mean, most of the time I'll have the director in the room, and we tend to give actors plenty of time. I mean, I don't see it as a test, you see. I always see it as a kind of, let's sit into the script and see where we get to, and we'll shoot it. If I feel an actor, like there was an actor once who came in and they were so nervous they developed a really bad tick under their eye. And it was terrifying because it just looked ridiculous on camera. So I stopped the audition and I said, look, I don't know what's happening, but I think you just need to go back out. We were in the factory at the time, and just walk around the car park and come back in, because all I can see on the camera is this tick, and it was like that. And so the actor went out and went around the car park and came back in and sat and said, I'm fine now. And I went, great, and put on the camera, and there were 2 ticks. So I had to send them home and say, you need to. I said, what happened? And he says, I think I drank about 10 cups of coffee before I came in here. And I said, can you lay off the fucking coffee? Because all I see is 2 heartbeats going in your face, basically, for fear. But I have sat in rooms where the directors can be short and can make their minds up very quick, and I always feel like, oh, but the director calls the room. If I have the director in the room, the director calls the room. I can say something to the director after the actor goes out, like, why couldn't you just blah-de-dee-blah? But the moment is over then. Yeah.
I suppose, you know, you're a woman in the industry, and you're very powerful. I suppose just in relation to, you know, Waking the Feminists and then Me Too, I suppose you're working with more female directors and female writers, and also with regards to diversity. So, like non-white actors, do you have anything kind of to say about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and I've been on a panel for diversity over the last couple of months, and I do think we have some actors here that will be interested in this. But in the year 2003, my partner is black from New York, came to Ireland to spend his life with me, God bless him. And he walked down O'Connell Street and he looked at me and he said, where are all the brothers? And I went, there are none. There are no brothers, Eric, sorry about that. There might be one in Finglas and there might be one in Tala. That was 2003. 5 years later, we had a community. It has taken us, and is still taking us, an inordinate amount of time to grow a... what would be the word? To grow a community of actors of colour, be it Asian, black, even not just about colour, but diversity in terms of Ukraine, Poland, Czech, you know, our immigrants. It's taken a huge amount of time. The other thing that bothers me is that I'm concerned that we don't have the writers from those communities coming up fast enough to write the dramas that we need to be making to work with the actors. we're definitely trying to do that, but there is something for me that's a little bit objectionable about a white person writing a black man's story or a black woman's story or a Chinese person's story. There is something slightly off for me in that, and it is true that that is what we're still seeing. Like 5 years ago, Stuart Carlin, whom I adore, wrote Taken Down, which he wrote as a response to the fact that he was seeing nothing but white drama on TV, and that was his starting off point. And that was a good point. The problem was he starts to write a drama that's set in direct provision, and he's writing the stories of people in direct provision. But what the fuck does he know? Like, he's assuming again. And you know, the series was well received, but I think we need to start seeing the real stories. We need to start telling the real stories. Ireland is not white Ireland anymore, and we are all the better for that. Absolutely all the better for that. And we need to embrace that, but we need to support these communities to develop the confidence to write their own drama and to develop the ownership of saying, my drama is as good as anything, you know, that Stuart Carlin might write or any other writer in this country. And our actors are good. And we are beginning to grow a fantastic community of young actors. But I still find it difficult if I'm trying to cast a black actor over the age of 40 or 50 or a black actress. We just don't have them here yet. And I don't know if they'll come, but maybe they won't. But maybe it's a question of us growing. We have to look after those actors. We have to make sure the right doors are open for them, so that actors like Clinton Liberty and Patrick and Kwaku and the girls like Florence Edamambo and Emmanuel. Emmanuel is doing pretty good though, isn't he? Emmanuel, he's gorgeous. Emmanuel, he's doing very well at the moment. But we need to make sure that they're getting the right roles and that they're not playing roles in service, or we're not casting them just to tick a box, because there's nothing more objectionable than that. I want to see them in proper roles and Irish roles, because for all those reasons.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So now,
Actually, I just want to mention, watch out for Gabriel Adewusi, by the way, who's in a short film, directed by TJ Payton, which is possibly going to get Oscar shortlisted this year. Gabriel Adewusi is fantastic. So I just want to make sure you keep an eye on him. I met him the other night. He's a lovely actor.
brilliant. It's called Room Taken, I think. Yeah, excellent short. That's great. Oh, well, thank you so much to Maureen Hughes. Please, big bull of us. Thank you so much.
This discussion has been made possible with the support of Screen Ireland, and if you want to attend our next live discussion, visit filmireland.ie and sign up for the newsletter.